All right, good to see everybody. My name is Richard. I'm with Google Cloud. James, remind me, what do you do?
Uh, Hey Richard, how you doing? I work at VMware Tanzu.
That's right. You do some technical stuff, right? I think we can count on you for some technical insight.
I think they call me the Chief Technology Officer of our division in a business formal way. Yep.
Nice, awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking some time to chat today. We're going to talk about mental models for multi-cloud to start with here. How do you think about this? When you hear about multi-cloud, it's usually a multi-dimensional kind of question. How do you kind of frame that in your own mind, and how do you talk to other people about it?
I mean, first thing I'd say is, Richard, it's really relevant, right? Like I was literally just on a Zoom with the Canadian bank that is a joint customer of Antheus and Tanzu, and their regulator was like, hey, show me how you fail over between things. So the first thing I'd say is it's not really a fabricated conversation. It's really a reality of heterogeneous enterprises. And I think in some sense, there are people dealing with the extreme of it, which is like, hey, I'm a little startup in San Francisco and I just want to pick a cloud and go. And don't bother me with multi-cloud. And then I think you've got the other example of like, hey, I'm a 70-year-old company at scale that has a lot of complexity, and I need thinking that helps me parse and digest that complexity of the way I operate. So the way I think about it is it's a very contextual word that different people can talk past each other very quickly if they have different needs and the different operating models. So I think being very contextual about how you think of multi-cloud and what that means to the person saying it is really important. And when I see the Twitter wars about it, I don't get into them because usually it's just one person coming from one context, kind of talking past someone else from the other one. Does that make any sense to you and your travels, your time
It does.
over at Google?
It does. So you obviously see it from different ways as we look at the compute layers, data, things like that. But when you hear someone say that this makes sense to them, where are they typically coming from? You mentioned heterogeneous this environment. They've got different sort of setups. Where are they usually coming from? Why do they say this makes sense?
I think the context of the people that think it doesn't make sense are the people that are very focused on, say, data gravity problems, and they've designed a lot of their identity and security models specifically to one cloud. So if you're all in on Redshift on Amazon and everything you do is an IAM rule, you're going to kind of pop your head up and go like, multi-cloud, like I got data gravity everywhere and everything is customized to an IAM rule. That sounds really hard. I think the other universe of people come at it from more of a developer productivity perspective, where they say it's really about developer gravity. And everything I do is somewhere within the Kubernetes ecosystem because I want the most pluggable set of developer tools, CI/CD. I want things that developers are familiar with, the latest frameworks, the latest open source technologies. And so that developer gravity is inherently multi-cloud because software is inherently multi-cloud. So I see people that are very focused on like big analytics and very deeply integrated system administration principles, arguing with people that are very developer oriented and might be coming at this more from an open source and productivity perspective. But I said, like, I don't get in the middle of that because they're actually not disagreeing. They're just saying very different things.
That's right. That makes sense. So when you look at the hard parts of this, so when you are talking to someone going, hey, we're going down this path, or maybe we accidentally realized we're already doing a lot of this, where do you see the sticky points where someone has to really be thoughtful about how to do it right?
Yeah, I think I come back to that model I gave to you, which is that, and I think I'm just an observer, but I think Google made some novel announcements about trying to bring BigQuery everywhere. I've not used it or I don't know much about it, but that was at least novel, right? Which is like, hey, we're going to do that. But I think most people probably run your BigQuery stuff on the cloud, right? Like they're not running that everywhere today. That was more of a design concept car almost, right? Like that's how I looked at that. That was kind of cool. So I think that's something that I think is inherently still hard, right? If you look at how much it costs to get, data moving from one cloud to the next and you're doing analytics, I think that is hard. And I think you'll lose credibility with people if you somehow pretend you can abstract and nullify that equation. I think where people are getting really big wins though, Richard, and this is why I'm happy to participate here, is I do think that there's an emerging DevSecOps ecosystem that's happening that is by its nature multi-cloud because it's a best of breed DevSecOps toolchain. And I think that's very centered on Kubernetes and the community that's happening there. And that no large scale organization that I've met wants to build a new DevSecOps platform for every infrastructure they consume. Like, that doesn't really make sense. And the biggest pauses I get are people that really even want to build like IAM rules into one DevSecOps pipeline. I think you should be more multi-cloud than that. So those are a couple observations. Like, DevSecOps versus doing big analytic jobs are very different use cases.
Yeah, I buy that. So then what's counterbalance that? What's easier than people think? Because we can all get worked up about multi-cloud and all the complexity and all the sticky things, but you and I have spent a lot of time professionally with the Spring framework, things that maybe, hey, if you do the right abstraction, maybe this actually isn't as hard as we think it is. So where do you actually talk people down off the ledge a little bit? Like, hey, this is actually just do the right thing. Here's some ways that are easier than you thought.
That's where things that have developer gravity versus data gravity are inherently multi-cloud. Because anything that you're just git cloning to start a project on your laptop, by its nature, the most important entity of compute to most developers I know is not the cloud, it is their laptop. Like, if you look at where things like Docker started, where HashiCorp really got its start, there's new companies out there like Gitpod that are very interesting. They're much more around the developer's laptop. So if you don't think that's inherently going to be multi-cloud, I think that's a bit of a miss. In fact, there was just an interesting Hacker News article thread about how Lambda is actually a pretty complicated DevX because it can't be run portably on the laptop. Now, I think with the work that's happening between VMware's contribution and Google's contribution to things like Knative, now you can start to imagine an ecosystem that is both laptop and cloud friendly. And I think thinking about what happens at the developer's laptop is more important in some ways than the quote unquote cloud architecture, is where you start to really realize where the multi-cloud ecosystem comes from.
Awesome. This has been great. I think your all perspective on this is terrific, especially as we're just all trying to help make sure people just do the right things for their own organization. As you say, context matters a ton. Any parting thoughts, any things you think about that as somebody is a CIO on their journey or a dev figuring out what to invest in next? Any assuring words or words of caution?
I think it's a great time to be working on multi-cloud technologies because I think it's just like that Unix to Linux transition that I lived through when I went from Sun to VMware. And I think that the explosion of things that are adding value above cloud hardware, like I think when Snowflake went public, that should be a wake-up call to everybody. Because some people used to think like, oh, you got to get all of your system software from your system provider. And I think Snowflake's IPO really broke the glass on that. And I think you're going to see more and more and more investment in these best of breed multi-cloud solutions. And I'd say the parting thought is that multi-cloud and best of breed go together well. Like, that's why you run Java everywhere, because it's the best of breed framework. You don't use a single clouds framework. So I think you're going to see more and more best of breed technologies, what's going to yield more multi-cloud technologies.
Good stuff, James. Well, it's always a pleasure to chat with you. I'm glad we get to connect again, and thanks for taking some time to chat with us. Talk soon.
Yeah, great chatting with you, Richard. Thank you.